he said, for some time. This sent me flying from the room. I would join her, and find out if she had heard. But I was too late. As I stepped into the hall, I saw her disappearing round the corner leading to her own room. This convinced me that she had heard nothing, and, light of heart once more, I went back to my own room, where I collected such little articles as I needed for the expedition before me. I had hardly done this when I heard the servants on the walk outside, then Arthur going down. The impulse to see and speak to him again was irresistible. I flew after him and caught him in the lower hall. "Arthur," I cried, look at me well, and then, kiss me." And he did kiss me. I'm glad when I think of it, though he did say, next minute, "What is the matter with you? What are you going to do?" "To meet that villain." I looked straight into his face. I waited till I saw I had his whole attention, then I said, as slowly and emphatically as I could, "If you mean Elwood, no. I shall never meet him again, except in Adelaide's presence. He will not want to meet me. You may be at ease about that. Tomorrow all will be well, and Adelaide very happy." He shrugged his shoulders, and reached for his coat and hat. As he was putting them on, I said, "Don't forget to harness up Jenny. Jenny is the grey mare. And leave off the bells," I urged. "I don't want Adelaide to hear me go out." He swung about at this. "You and Adelaide are not very good friends, it seems." "As good as you and she are," I answered. Then I flung my arms about him. "Don't go down street tonight," I prayed. "Stay home for this one night. Stay in the house with Adelaide, stay till I come home." He stared, and I saw his color change. Then he flung me off, but not rudely. "Why don't you stay?" he asked. Then he laughed, and added, "I'll go harness the mare." "The key's in the kitchen," I said. "I'll go get it for you." I heard Zadok bring it in. He did not answer, and I went for the key. I found two on the nail, and I brought them both, but I only handed him one, the key to the stable door. "Which way are you going?" I asked, as he looked at the key, then back towards the kitchen. "The short way, of course." "Then here's the key to the Fulton grounds." As he took the key, I prayed again, "Don't do what's in your mind, Arthur. Don't drink tonight." He only laughed, and I said my last word, "If you do, it will be for the last time. You'll never drink again after tomorrow." He made no answer to this, and I went slowly upstairs. Everything was quiet, quiet as death, in the whole house. If Adelaide had heard us, she made no sign. Going to my own room, I waited until I heard Arthur come out of the stable and go away by the door in the rear wall. Then I stole out again. I carried a small bag with me, but no coat or hat. Pausing and listening again and again, I crept downstairs and halted at the table under the rack. The keys were still there. Putting them in my bag, I searched the rack for one of my brother's warm coats. But I took none I saw. I remembered an old one which Adelaide had put away in the closet under the stairs. Getting this, I put it on, and, finding a hat there too, I took that also, and when I had pulled it over my forehead and drawn up the collar of the coat, I was quite unrecognizable. I was going out, when I remembered there would be no light in the clubhouse. I had put a box of matches in my bag while I was upstairs, but I needed a candle. Slipping back, I took a candlestick and candle from the dining room mantel, and finding that the bag would not hold them, thrust them into the pocket of the coat I wore, and quickly left the house. Jenny was in the stable, all harnessed, and hesitating no longer, I got in among the bearskins and drove swiftly away. There was a moment's silence. Carmel had paused, and was sitting with her hand on her heart, looking past judge, past jury, upon the lonely and desolate scene in which she at this moment moved and suffered. An inexpressible fatality had entered into her tones, always rich and resonant with feeling. No one who listened could fail to share the dread by which she was moved. District Attorney Fox fumbled with his papers, and endeavored to maintain his equanimity and show an indifference which his stern but fascinated glances at the youthful witness amply belied. He was biding his time, but biding it in decided perturbation of mind. Neither he nor anyone else, unless it were Moffat, could tell whither this tale tended. While she held the straight course which had probably been laid out for her, he failed to object, but he could not prevent the subtle influence of her voice, her manner, and her supreme beauty on the entranced jury. Nevertheless, his pencil was busy, he was still sufficiently master of himself for that. Mr. Moffat, quite aware of the effect which was being produced on every side, but equally careful to make no show of it, put in a commonplace question at this point, possibly to rouse the witness from her own abstraction, possibly to restore the judicial tone of the inquiry. "How did you leave the stable door?" "Open." "Can you tell us what time it was when you started?" "No, I did not look. Time meant nothing to me. I drove as fast as I could, straight down the hill, and out towards the Whispering Pines. I had seen Adelaide in her window as I went flying by the house, but not a soul on the road, nor a sign of life, near or far. The whistle of a train blew as I stopped in the thicket near the clubhouse door. If it was the express train, you can tell, never mind the if," said Mr. Moffat. "It is enough that you heard the whistle. Go on with what you did." "I tied up my horse, then I went into the house. I had used Mr. Ranelagh's key to open the door, and for some reason I took it out of the lock when I got in, and put the whole bunch back into my satchel. But I did not lock the door. Then I lit my candle and then I went upstairs." Fainter and fainter the words fell, and slower heaved the youthful breast under her heavily pressing palm. Mr. Moffat made a sign across the courtroom, and I saw Dr. Carpenter get up and move nearer to the witness stand. But she stood in no need of his help. In an instant her cheek flushed, the eye I watched with such intensity of wonder that apprehension unconsciously left me, rose, glowed, and fixed itself at last, not on the judge, not on the prisoner, not even on that prisoner's counsel, but on me. And as the soft light filled my soul and awoke or, where it had hitherto awakened passion, she quietly said, "There is a room upstairs, in the clubhouse, where I have often been with Adelaide. It has a fireplace in it, and I had seen a box there, half filled with wood the day before. This is the room I went to, and here I built a fire. When it was quite bright, I took out something I had brought in my satchel, and thrust it into the flame. Then I got up and walked away. I did not feel very strong, and sank on my knees when I got to the couch, and buried my face in my arms. But I felt better when I came back to the fire again, and very brave till I caught a glimpse of my face in the mirror over the mantelpiece. That unnerved me, and I think I screamed. Someone screamed, and I think it was I. I know my hands went out, I saw them in the glass, then they fell straight down at my side, and I looked and looked at myself till I saw all the terror go out of my face, and when it was quite calm again, I stooped down and pulled out the little tongs I had been heating in the fire, and laid them quick, before I could be sorry again, right across my cheek, and then, uproar in the court. If she had screamed when she said she did, so someone cried out loudly now. I think that pitiful person was myself. They say I had been standing straight up in my place for the last 2 minutes. Choose let me have a dram of poison, such soon speeding gear as will disperse itself through all the veins, that the life-weary taker may fall dead. Come, bitter conduct, come unsavory guide. Thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks thy seasick weary bark. Romeo and Juliet I have not finished were the first words we heard, when order was restored, and we were all in a condition to listen again. I had to relate what you have just heard, that you might understand what happened next. I was not used to pain, and I could never have kept on pressing those irons to my cheek if I had not had the strength given me by my own reflection in the glass. When I thought the burn was quite deep enough, I tore the tongs away, and was lifting them to the other cheek when I saw the door behind me open, inch by inch, as though pushed by hesitating touches. Instantly, I forgot my pain, almost my purpose, watching that door. I saw it slowly swing to its full width, and disclose my sister standing in the gap, with a look and in an attitude which terrified me more than the fire had done. Dropping the tongs, I turned and faced her, covering my cheek instinctively with my hand. I saw her eyes run over my elaborate dinner dress, my little handbag, and the candle burning in a room made warm with a fire on the hearth. This, before she spoke a single word. Then, with a deep laboring breath, she looked me in the eye again, with the simple question, "And where is he?" Carmel's head had drooped at this, but she raised it almost instantly. Mine did not rise so readily. "Do you mean Elwood?" I asked. "You know," said she. "The veil is down between us, Carmel, we will speak plainly now. I saw him give you the letter. I heard you ask Arthur to harness up the horse. I have demeaned myself to follow you, and we will have no subterfuges now. You expect him here? No, I cried. I am not so bad as that, Adelaide, nor is he. Here is the note. You will see by it what he expects, and at what place I should have joined him, if I had been the selfish creature you think I had the note hidden in my breast. I took it out, and held it towards her. I did not feel the burn at all, but I kept it covered. She glanced down at the words, and I felt like falling at her feet. She looked so miserable. I am told that I must keep to fact, and must not express my feelings, or those of others. I will try to remember this, but it is hard for a sister, relating such a frightful scene. She glanced down at the paper and let it drop, almost immediately, from her hand. I cannot read his words, she cried. I do not need to, we both know which of us he loves best. You cannot say that it is I, his engaged wife. I was silent, and her face took on an awful pallor. Carmel, said she, do you know what this man's love has been to me? You are a child, a warm-hearted and passionate child, but you do not know a woman's heart. Certainly, you do not know mine. I doubt if anyone does, even he. Cares have warped my life. I do not quarrel with these cares, I only say that they have robbed me of what makes girlhood lovely. Duty is a stern taskmaster, and sternness, coming early into one's life, hardens its edges, but does not sap passion from the soul or devotion from the heart. I was ready for joy when it came, but I was no longer capable of bestowing it. I thought I was, but I soon saw my mistake. You showed it to me, you with your beauty, your freshness, your warm and untried heart. I have no charms to rival these, I have only love, such love as you cannot dream of at your age. And this is no longer desirable to him. You see that I remember every word she spoke. They burned more fiercely than the iron. That did not burn at all, just then. I was cold instead, bitterly, awfully cold. My very heart seemed frozen, and the silence was dreadful. But I could not speak, I could not answer her. You have everything, she now went on. Why did you rob me of my one happiness? And you have robbed me. I have seen your smile when his head turned your way. It was the smile which runs before a promise. I know it, I have had that smile in my heart a long, long time, but it never reached my lips. Carmel, do you know why I am here? I shook my head. Was it her teeth that were chattering or mine? I am here to end it all, said she. With my hope gone, my heart laid waste, life has no prospect for me. I believe in God, and I know that my act is sinful, but I can no more live than can a tree stricken at the root. Tomorrow he will not need to write notes, he can come and comfort you in our home. But never let him look at me. As we are sisters, and I almost a mother to you, shut my face away from his eyes, or I shall rise in my casket and the tangle of our lives will be renewed. I tell you this, I bear my sister's broken heart to you, giving you her very words, sacred as they are to me and to others, who are present, and must listen to all I say, because it is right that you should understand her frenzy, and know all that passed between us in that awful hour. This was irregular, highly irregular, but District Attorney Fox sat on, unmoved. Possibly he feared to prejudice the jury, possibly he recognized the danger of an interruption now, not only to the continuity of her testimony, but to the witness herself, or, what is just as likely, possibly he cherished a hope that, in giving her a free rein and allowing her to tell her story thus artlessly, she would herself supply the clue he needed to reconstruct his case on the new lines upon which it was being slowly forced by these unexpected revelations. Whatever the cause, he let these expressions of feeling pass. At a gesture from Mr. Moffat, Carmel proceeded, I tottered at this threat, and she, a mother to me from my cradle, started instinctively to catch me, but the feeling left her before she had taken 2 steps, and she stopped still. Drop your hand, she cried. I want to see your whole face while I ask you one last question. I could not read the note. Why did you come here? I dropped my hand, and she stood staring, then she uttered a cry and ran quickly towards me. What is it? She cried. What has happened to you? Is it the shadow or? I caught her by the hand. I could speak now. Adelaide, said I, you are not the only one to love to the point of hurt. I love you. Let this little scar be witness then. As her eyes opened and she staggered, I caught her to my breast and hid my face on her shoulder. You say that tomorrow I shall be free to receive notes. He will not wish to write them, tomorrow. The beauty he liked is gone. If it weighed overmuch with him, then you and I are on a plane again, or I am on an inferior one. Your joy will be sweeter for this break. She started, raised my head from her shoulder, looked at me and shuddered, but no longer with hate. Carmel, she whispered, the story I read you of Francis I and, yes, I agreed, that made me think her knees bent under her, she sank at my feet, but her eyes never left my face. And Elwood. He knows nothing. I did not make up my mind till tonight. Adelaide, it had to be. I hadn't the strength to leave you all, or to say no, if he ever asked me to my face what he asked me in that note, and then I tried to lift her, but she was kissing my feet, kissing my dress, sobbing out her life on my hands. Oh, I was happy. My future looked very simple to me. But my cheek began to burn, and instinctively I put up my hand. This brought her to her feet. You are suffering, she cried. You must go home, at once, while I telephone to Dr. Carpenter. We will go together, I said. We can telephone from there. But at this, the awful look came back into her face, and seeing her forget my hurt, I forgot it, too, in dread of what she would say when she found strength to speak. It was worse than anything I had imagined. She refused absolutely to go back home. Carmel, said she, I have done injustice to your youth. You love him, too, not like a child but a woman. The tangle is worse than I thought, your heart is caught in it, as well as mine, and you shall have your chance. My death will give it to you. I shook my head, pointing to my cheek. She shook hers, and quietly, calmly said, "You have never looked so beautiful. Should we go back together and take up the old life, the struggle which has undermined my conscience and my whole existence would only begin again. I cannot face that ordeal, Carmel. The morning light would bring me daily torture, the evening dusk a night of blasting dreams. We three cannot live in this world together. I am the least loved and so I should be the one to die. I am determined, Carmel. Life, with me, has come to this." I tried to dissuade her. I urged every plea, even that of my own sacrifice. But she was no more her natural self. She had taken up the note and read it during my entreaties, and my words fell on deaf ears. "Why, these words have killed me," she cried, crumpling the note in her hand. "What will a little poison do? It can only finish what he has begun." Poison. I remembered how I had heard her pushing about bottles in the medicine cabinet, and felt my legs grow weak and my head swim. "You will not," I cried, watching her hand, in terror of seeing it rise to her breast. "You are crazed tonight, tomorrow you will feel differently." But the fixed set look of her bleak face gave me no hope. "I shall never feel differently. If I do not end it tonight, I shall do so soon. When a heart like mine goes down, it goes down forever." I could only shudder. I did not know what to do, or which way to turn. She stood between me and the door, and her presence was terrible. "When I came here," she said, "I brought a bottle of cordial with me and 3 glasses. I brought a little phial of poison too, once ordered for sickness. I expected to find Elwood here. If I had, I meant to drop the poison into 1 glass, and then fill them all up with the cordial. We should have drunk, each one of us his glass, and one of us would have fallen. I did not care which, you or Elwood or myself. But he is not here, and the cast of the die is between us two, unless you wish a certainty, Carmel, in which case I will pour out but 1 glass and drink that myself." She was in a fever, now, and desperate. Death was in the room. I felt it in my lifted hair, and in her strangely drawn face. If I screamed, who would hear me? I never thought of the telephone, and I doubt if she would have let me use it then. The power she had always exerted over me was very strong in her at this moment, and not till afterwards did it cross my mind that I had never asked her how she got to the house, or whether we were as much alone in the building as I believed. "Shall I drink alone?" she repeated, and I cried out no, at which her hand went to her breast, as I had so long expected, and I saw the glitter of a little phial as she drew it forth. "Oh, Adelaide," I began, but she heeded me no more than the dead. On leaving home, she had put on a long coat with pockets, and this coat was still on her, and the pockets gaping. Thrusting her other hand into one of these, She drew out a little flask covered with wicker, and set it on a stand beside her. Then she pulled out 2 small glasses, and set them down also, and then she turned her back. I could hear the drop of the liquor, and, dark as the room was, it seemed to turn darker, till I put out my hands like one groping in a sudden night. But everything cleared before me when she turned around again. Features set like hers forced themselves to be seen. She advanced, a glass in either hand. As she came, the floor swayed, and the walls seemed to bow together, but they did not sway her. Step by step, she drew near, and when she reached my side she smiled in my face once. Then she said, "Choose a right, dear heart. Leave the poisoned one for me." Fascinated, I stared at one glass, then at the other. Had either of her hands trembled, I should have grasped at the glass it held, but not a tremor shook those icy fingers, nor did her eyes wander to the right hand or to the left. "Adelaide!" I shrieked out. "Toss them behind you. Let us live, live." But she only reiterated that awful word, "choose," and I dare not hesitate longer, lest I lose my chance to save her. Groping, I touched a glass, I never knew which one, and drawing it from her fingers, I lifted it to my mouth. Instantly her other hand rose. "I don't know which is which, myself," she said, and drank. That made me drink, also. The 2 glasses sent out a clicking sound as we set them back on the stand. Then we waited, looking at each other. "Which?" her lips seemed to say. "Which?" In another moment we knew. "Your choice was the right one," said she, and she sank back into a chair. "Don't leave me," she called out, for I was about to run shrieking out into the night. I am happy now that it is all settled, but I do not want to die alone. Oh, how hot I am!" And leaping up, she flung off her coat, and went gasping about the room for air. When she sank down again, it was on the lounge, and again I tried to fly for help, and again she would not let me. Suddenly she started up, and I saw a great change in her. The heavy, leaden look was gone, tenderness had come back to her eyes, and a human anxious expression to her whole face. "I have been mad," she cried. "Carmel, Carmel, what have I done to you, my more than sister, my child, my child?" I tried to soothe her, to keep down my awful fear and soothe her. But the nearness of death had calmed her poor heart into its old love and habitual thoughtfulness. She was terrified at my position. She recalled our mother, and the oath she had taken at that mother's deathbed to protect me and care for me and my brother. "And I have failed to do either," she cried. "Arthur, I have alienated, and you I am leaving to unknown trouble and danger." She was not to be comforted. I saw her life ebbing and could do nothing. She clung to me while she called up all her powers, and made plans for me and showed me a way of escape. I was to burn the note, fling 2 of the glasses from the window and leave the other and the deadly phial near her hand. This, before I left the room. Then I was to call up the police and say there was something wrong at the clubhouse, but I was not to give my name or ever acknowledge I was there. Nothing can save trouble, she said, but that trouble must not come near you. Swear that you will heed my words, swear that you will do what I say. I swore. All that she asked I promised. I was almost dying, too, and had the light gone out and the rafters of the house fallen in and buried us both, it would have been better. But the light burned on, and the life in her eyes faded out, and the hands grasping mine relaxed. I heard one little gasp, then a low prayer, tell Arthur never, never, again to, then, silence. Sobs, cries, veiled faces, then silence in the courtroom, too. It was broken but by one sound, a heart-rending sigh from the prisoner. But nobody looked at him, and thank God, nobody looked at me. Every eye was on the face of this young girl, whose story bore such an impress of truth, and yet was so contradictory of all former evidence. What revelations were yet to follow? It would seem that she was speaking of her sister's death. But her sister had not died that way, her sister had been strangled. Could this dainty creature, with beauty scarred and yet powerfully triumphant, be the victim of an hallucination as to the cause of that scar and the awesome circumstances which attended its infliction? Or, harder still to believe, were these soul-compelling tones, these evidences of grief, this pathetic yielding to the rights of the law in face of the heart's natural shrinking from disclosures sacred as they were tragic, were these the medium by which she sought to mislead justice and to conceal truth? Even I, with my memory of her looks as she faltered down the staircase on that memorable night, pale, staring, her left hand to her cheek and rocking from side to side in pain or terror, could not but ask if this heart-rending story did not involve a still more terrible sequel. I searched her face, and racked my very soul, in my effort to discern what lay beneath this angelic surface, beneath this recital which, if it were true and the whole truth, would call not only for the devotion of a lifetime, but a respect transcending love and elevating it to worship. But, in her cold and quiet features, I could detect nothing beyond the melancholy of grief, and the suspense from which all suffered, kept me also on the rack, until at a question from Mr. Moffat she spoke again, and we heard her say, "Yes, she died that way," with her hands in mine. There was no one else by, we were quite alone. That settled it, and for a moment the revulsion of feeling threatened to throw the court into tumult. But one thing restrained them. Not the look of astonishment on her face, not the startled uplift of Arthur's head, not the quiet complacency which in an instant replaced the defeated aspect of the district attorney, but the gesture and attitude of Mr. Moffat, the man who had put her on the stand, and who now from the very force of his personality, kept the storm in abeyance, and by his own composure, forced back attention to his witness and to his own confidence in his case. This result reached, he turned again towards Carmel, with renewed respect in his manner and a marked softening in his aspect and voice. "Can you fix the hour of this occurrence?" he asked. "In any way can you locate the time?" "No, for I did not move at once." I felt tied to that couch. I am very young, and I had never seen death before. When I did get up, I hobbled like an old woman and almost went distracted, but came to myself as I saw the note on the floor, the note I was told to burn. Lifting it, I moved towards the fireplace, but got a fright on the way, and stopped in the middle of the floor and looked back. I thought I had heard my sister speak. But the fancy passed as I saw how still she lay, and I went on, after a while, and threw the note into the one small flame which was all that was left of the fire. I saw it caught by a draught from the door behind me, and go flaming up the chimney. Some of my trouble seemed to go with it, but a great one yet remained. I didn't know how I could ever turn around again and see my sister lying there behind me, with her face fixed in death, for which I was, in a way, responsible. I was abjectly frightened, and knelt there a long time, praying and shuddering, before I could rise again to my feet and move about as I had to, since God had not stricken me and I must live my life and do what my sister had bidden me. Courage, such courage as I had had, was all gone from me now, and while I knew there was something else for me to do before I left the room, I could not remember what it was, and stood hesitating, dreading to lift my eyes and yet feeling that I ought to, if only to aid my memory by a look at my sister's face. Suddenly I did look up, but it did not aid my memory, and, realizing that I could never think with that lifeless figure before me, I lifted a pillow from the window seat nearby and covered her face. I must have done more. I must have covered the whole lounge with pillows and cushions, for, presently my mind cleared again, and I recollected that it was something about the poison. I was to put the phial in her hand, or was I to throw it from the window? Something was to be thrown from the window, it must be the phial. But I couldn't lift the window. So having found the phial standing on the table beside the little flask, I carried it into the closet where there was a window opening inward, and I dropped it out of that, and thought I had done all. But when I came back and saw Adelaide's coat lying in a heap where she had thrown it, I recalled that she had said something about this, but what, I didn't know. So I lifted it and put it in the closet. Why, I cannot say. Then I set my mind on going home. But there was something to do first, something not in that room. It was a long time before it came to me, then the sight of the empty hall recalled it. The door by which Adelaide had come in had never been closed, and as I went towards it I remembered the telephone, and that I was to call up the police. Lifting the candle, I went creeping towards the front hall. Adelaide had commanded me, or I could never have accomplished this task. I had to open a door, and when it swung to behind me and latched, I turned around and looked at it, as if I never expected it to open again. I almost think I fainted, if one can faint standing, for when I knew anything, after the appalling latching of that door, I was in quite another part of the room, and the candle which I still held, looked to my dazed eyes shorter than when I started with it from the place where my sister lay. I was wasting time. The thought drove me to the table. I caught up the receiver, and when Central answered, I said something about the Whispering Pines and wanting help. This is all I remember about that. Some time afterward, I don't know when, I was stumbling down the stairs on my way out. I had gone to the room again for my little bag, for the keys were in it, and I dared not leave them. But I didn't stay a minute, and I cast but one glance at the lounge. What happened afterward is like a dream to me. I found the horse found the road, and some time later I reached home. As I came within sight of the house I grew suddenly strong again. The open stable door reminded me of my duty, and driving in, I quickly unharnessed Jenny and put her away. Then I dragged the cutter into place, and hung up the harness. Lastly, I locked the door and carried the key with me into the house and hung it up on its usual nail in the kitchen. I had obeyed Adelaide, and now I would go to my room. That is what she would wish, but I don't know whether I did this or not. My mind was full of Adelaide till confusion came, then darkness, and then a perfect blank. She had finished, she had done as she had been asked, she had told the story of that evening as she knew it, from the family dinner till her return home after midnight, and the mystery of Adelaide's death was as great as ever. Did she realize this? Had I wronged this lovely, tempestuous nature by suspicions which this story put to blush? I was happy to think so, madly, unreasonably happy. Whatever happened, whatever the future threatening Arthur or myself, it was rapture to be restored to right thinking as regards this captivating and youthful spirit, who had suffered and must suffer always, and all through me, who thought it a pleasant pastime to play with hearts, and awoke to find I was playing with souls, and those of the two noblest women I had ever known. The cutting in of some half-dozen questions from Mr. Moffat, which I scarcely heard and which did not at all affect the status of the case as it now stood, served to cool down the emotional element, which had almost superseded the judicial, in more minds than those of the jury, and having thus prepared his witness for an examination at other and less careful hands, he testified his satisfaction at her replies, and turned her over to the prosecution, with the time-worn phrase, "Mr. District Attorney, the witness is yours." Mr. Fox at once arose. The moment was ripe for conquest. He put his most vital question first. "In all this interview with your sister, did you remark any discoloration on her throat?" The witness's lips opened, surprise spoke from her every feature. "Discoloration," she repeated. "I do not know what you mean." "Any marks darker than the rest of her skin on her throat or neck?" "No. Adelaide had a spotless skin. It looked like marble as she lay there." "No, I saw no marks." "Miss Cumberland, have you heard or read a full account of this trial?" She was trembling, now. Was it from fear of the truth, or under that terror of the unknown embodied in this question? "I do not know," said she. "What I heard was from my nurse and Mr. Moffat. I read very little, and that was only about the first days of the trial and the swearing in of jurors. This is the first time I have heard any mention made of marks, and I do not understand yet what you allude to." District Attorney Fox cast at Mr. Moffat an eloquent glance, which that gentleman bore unmoved. Then turning back to the witness, he addressed her in milder and more considerate tones than were usually heard from him in cross-examination, and asked, "Did you hold your sister's hands all the time she lay dying, as you thought, on the lounge?" "Yes, yes." "And did not see her raise them once?" "No, no." "How was it when you let go of them?" "Where did they fall then?" "On her breast." "I laid them down softly and crossed them. I did not leave her till I had done this and closed her eyes." "And what did you do then?" "I went for the note, to burn it." "Miss Cumberland, in your direct examination, you said that you stopped still as you crossed the floor at the time, thinking that your sister called, and that you looked back at her to see." "Yes, sir." "Were her hands crossed then?" "Yes, sir, just the same." "And afterward, when you came from the fire after waiting some little time for courage?" "Yes, yes." "There were no signs of movement?" "Oh, she was dead, quite dead." "No statements, Miss Cumberland?" "She looked the same, and you saw no change in the position of her hands?" "None, they were just as I left them." "Miss Cumberland, you have told us how, immediately after taking the poison, she staggered about the room, and sank first on a chair and then on the lounge. Were you watching her then?" "Oh, yes, every moment." "Her hands as well as her face?" "I don't know about her hands. I should have observed it if she had done anything strange with them." "Can you say she did not clutch or grip her throat during any of this time?" "Yes, yes. I couldn't have forgotten it, if she had done that. I remember every move she made so well." "She didn't do that." Mr. Fox's eye stole towards the jury. To a man, they were alert, anxious for the next question, and serious, as the arbitrators of a man's life ought to be. Satisfied, he put the question, "When, after telephoning, you returned to the room where your sister lay, you glanced at the lounge?" "Yes, I could not help it." "Was it in the same condition as when you left, the pillows, I mean?" I think so." "I cannot say, I only half looked, I was terrified by it." "Can you say they had not been disturbed?" "No, I can say nothing." "But what does, only the answer, Miss Cumberland. Can you tell us how those pillows were arranged?" "I'm afraid not. I threw them down quickly, madly, just as I collected them. I only know that I put the window cushion down first. The rest fell anyhow, but they quite covered her, quite. Hands and face. Her whole body." "And did they cover her quite when you came back?" "They must have. Wait. I know I have no right to say that, but I cannot swear that I saw any change." "Can you swear that there was no change, that the pillows and the window cushion lay just as they did when you left the room?" She did not answer. Horror seemed to have seized hold of her. Her eyes, fixed on the attorney's face, wavered and, had they followed their natural impulse, would have turned towards her brother, but her fear, possibly her love, was her counselor, and she brought them back to Mr. Fox. Resolutely, but with a shuddering insight of the importance of her reply, she answered with that one weighty monosyllable which can crush so many hopes, and even wreck a life. No. At the next moment she was in Dr. Carpenter's arms. Her strength had given way for the time, and the court was hastily adjourned, to give her opportunity for rest and recuperation. XXXI were her hands crossed then. 70 I can remember well, within the volume of which time, I have seen hours dreadful, and things strange, but this sore night hath trifled former knowledge. Macbeth. I shall say nothing about myself at this juncture. That will come later. I have something of quite different purport to relate. When I left the courtroom with the other witnesses, I noticed a man standing near the district attorney. He was a very plain man, with no especial claims to attention, that I could see, yet I looked at him longer than I did at anyone else, and turned and looked at him again as I passed through the doorway. Afterward I heard that he was Sweetwater, the detective from New York who had had so much to do in unearthing the testimony against Arthur, testimony which in the light of this morning's revelations, had taken on quite a new aspect, as he was doubtless the first to acknowledge. It was the curious blending of professional disappointment and a personal and characteristic appreciation of the surprising situation, which made me observe him, I suppose. Certainly my heart and mind were full enough not to waste looks on a commonplace stranger unless there had been some such overpowering reason. I left him still talking to Mr. Fox, and later received this account of the interview which followed between them and Dr. Perry. "Is this girl telling the truth?" asked District Attorney Fox, as soon as the three were closeted and each could speak his own mind. "Doctor, what do you think?" "I do not question her veracity in the least. A woman who for purely moral reasons could defy pain and risk the loss of a beauty universally acknowledged as transcendent, would never stoop to falsehood even in her desire to save a brother's life. I have every confidence in her, Fox, and I think you may safely have the same. You believe that she burnt herself, intentionally. I wouldn't disbelieve it. You may think me sentimental. I knew and loved her father, for any fortune you might name. Say that you never knew her father, say that you had no more interest in the girl or the case, than the jurors have. What then? I should believe her for humanity's sake, for the sake of the happiness it gives one to find something true and strong in this sordid work-a-day world, a jewel in a dust heap. Oh, I'm a sentimentalist, I acknowledge." Mr. Fox turned to Sweetwater. "And you, Mr. Fox, have you those tongs?" "Yes, I forgot. They were brought to my office, with the other exhibits. I attached no importance to them, and you will probably find them just where I thrust them into the box marked "Come." They were in the district attorney's office, and Sweetwater at once rose and brought forward the tongs. "There is my answer," he said, pointing significantly at one of the legs. The district attorney turned pale, and motioned Sweetwater to carry them back. He sat silent for a moment, and then showed that he was a man. "Miss Cumberland has my respect," said he. Sweetwater came back to his place. Dr. Perry waited. Finally Mr. Fox turned to him and put the anticipated question, "You are satisfied with your autopsy?" Miss Cumberland's death was due to strangulation and not to the poison she took. That was what I swore to, and what I should have to swear to again if you placed me back on the stand. The poison, taken with her great excitement, robbed her of consciousness, but there was too little of it, or it was too old and weakened to cause death. She would probably have revived, in time, possibly did revive. But the clutch of those fingers was fatal, she could not survive it. It costs me more than you can ever understand to say this, but questions like yours must be answered. I should not be an honest man otherwise. Sweetwater made a movement. Mr. Fox turned and looked at him critically. "Speak out," said he. But Sweetwater had nothing to say. Neither had Dr. Perry. The oppression of an unsolved problem, involving lives of whose value each formed a different estimate, was upon them all, possibly heaviest upon the district attorney, the most serious portion of whose work lay still before him. To the relief of all, Carmel was physically stronger than we expected when she came to retake the stand in the afternoon. But she had lost a little of her courage. Her expectation of clearing her brother at a word had left her, and with it the excitation of hope. Yet she made a noble picture as she sat there, meeting, without a blush, but with an air of sweet humility impossible to describe, the curious, all-devouring glances of the multitude, some of them anxious to repeat the experience of the morning, some of them new to the court, to her, and the cause for which she stood. Mr. Fox kept nobody waiting. With a gentleness such as he seldom showed to any witness for the defense, he resumed his cross-examination by propounding the following question: "Miss Cumberland, in your account of the final interview you had with your sister, you alluded to a story you had once read together. Will you tell us the name of this story?" It was called A Legend of Francis I. It was not a novel, but a little tale she found in some old magazine. It had a great effect upon us, I have never forgotten it. Can you relate this tale to us in a few words? I will try. It was very simple. It merely told how a young girl marred her beauty to escape the attentions of the great king, and what respect he always showed her after that, even calling her sister. Was the thrill in her voice or in my own heart, or in the story, emphasized as it was by her undeniable attempt upon her own beauty? As that last word fell so softly, yet with such tender suggestion, a sensation of sympathy passed between us for the first time, and I knew, from the purity of her look and the fearlessness of this covert appeal to one she could not address openly, that the doubts I had cherished of her up to this very moment were an outrage, and that were it possible or seemly, I should be bowed down in the dust at her feet, in reality, as I was in spirit. Others may have shared my feeling, for the glances which flew from her face to mine were laden with an appreciation of the situation, which for the moment drove the prisoner from the minds of all, and centered attention on this tragedy of souls, bared in so cruel a way to the curiosity of the crowd. I could not bear it. The triumph of my heart battled with the shame of my fault, and I might have been tempted into some act of manifest imprudence, if Mr. Fox had not cut my misery short by recalling attention to the witness, with a question of the most vital importance. While you were holding your sister's hands in what you supposed to be her final moments, did you observe whether or not she still wore on her finger the curious ring given her by Mr. Ranelagh, and known as her engagement ring? Yes, I not only saw it, but felt it. It was the only one she wore on her left hand. The district attorney paused. This was an admission unexpected, perhaps, by himself, which it was desirable to have sink into the minds of the jury. The ring had not been removed by Adelaide herself, it was still on her finger as the last hour drew nigh. An awful fact, if established, telling seriously against Arthur. Involuntarily I glanced his way. He was looking at me. The mutual glance struck fire. What I thought, he thought, but possibly with a difference. The moment was surcharged with emotion for all but the witness herself. She was calm. Perhaps she did not understand the significance of the occasion. Mr. Fox pressed his advantage. And when you rose from the lounge and crossed your sister's hands, it was still there. I put that hand uppermost and left the ring on. Oh, yes, oh, yes. Her whole attitude and face were full of protest. So that, to the best of your belief, it was still on your sister's finger when you left the room? Certainly, sir, certainly. There was alarm in her tone now. She was beginning to see that her testimony was not as entirely helpful to Arthur as she had been led to expect. In her helplessness, she cast a glance of entreaty at her brother's counsel. But he was busily occupied with pencil and paper, and she received no encouragement unless it was from his studiously composed manner and general air of unconcern. She did not know, nor did I know then, what uneasiness such an air may cover. Mr. Fox had followed her glances, and perhaps understood his adversary better than she did, for he drew himself up with an appearance of satisfaction as he asked very quietly, "What material did you use in lighting the fire on the clubhouse hearth?" "Wood from the box, and a little kindling I found there." "How large was this kindling?" "Not very large, some few stray pieces of finer wood I picked out from she rest." "And how did you light these?" "With some scraps of paper I brought in my bag." "Oh, you brought scraps?" "Yes. I had seen the box, seen the wood, but knew the wood would not kindle without paper. So I brought some." "Did the fire light quickly?" "Not very quickly." "You had trouble with it?" "Yes, sir. But I made it burn at last." "Are you in the habit of kindling fires in your own home?" "Yes, on the hearth." "You understand them?" I have always found it a very simple matter, if you have paper and enough kindling. And the draft is good. Yes, sir. Wasn't the draft good at the clubhouse? Not at first. Oh, not at first. When did you see a change? When the note I was trying to burn flew up the chimney. I see. Was that after or before the door opened? After. Did the opening of this door alter the temperature of the room? I cannot say. I felt neither heat nor cold at any time. Didn't you feel the icy cold when you opened the dressing closet window to throw out the file? I don't remember. Wouldn't you remember if you had? I cannot say. Can you say whether you noticed any especial chill in the hall when you went out to telephone? My teeth were chattering, but had they chattered before? They may have. I only noticed it then, but the facts, Miss Cumberland. Your teeth chattered while you were passing through the hall. Did this keep up after you entered the room where you found the telephone? I don't remember. I was almost insensible. You don't remember that they did? No, sir. But you do remember having shut the door behind you? Yes. An open window in the hall. That was what he was trying to prove, open at this time. From the expression of such faces of the jury as I could see, I think he had proved it. The next point he made was in the same line. Had she, in all the time she was in the building, heard any noises she could not account for? Yes, many times. Can you describe these noises? No, they were of all kinds. The pines sighed continually. I knew it was the pines, but I had to listen. Once I heard a rushing sound. It was when the pines stopped swaying for an instant, but I don't know what it was. It was all very dreadful. Was this rushing sound such as a window might make on being opened? Possibly. I didn't think of it at the time, but it might have been. From what direction did it come? Back of me, for I turned my head about. Where were you at the time? At the hearth. It was before Adelaide came in. A near sound, or a far? Far, but I cannot locate it, indeed, I cannot. I forgot it in a moment. But you remember it now? Yes. And cannot you remember now any other noises than those you speak of? That time you stepped into the hall, when your teeth chattered, you know, did you hear nothing then but the sighing of the pines? She looked startled. Her hands went up and one of them clutched at her throat, then they fell, and slowly, carefully, like one feeling his way, she answered, I had forgotten. I did hear something, a sound in one of the doorways. It was very faint, a sigh, I don't know what. It conveyed nothing to me then, and not much now. But you asked, and I have answered. You have done right, Miss Cumberland. The jury ought to know these facts. Was it a human sigh? It wasn't the sigh of the pines. And you heard it in one of the doorways. Which doorway? The one opposite the room in which I left my sister. The doorway to the large hall. Yes, sir. Oh, the sinister memories. The moments which I myself had spent there, after this time of her passing through the hall, thank God, but not long after. And someone had been there before me. Was it Arthur? I hardly had the courage to interrogate his face, but when I did, I, like everyone else who looked that way, met nothing but the quietude of a fully composed man. There was nothing to be learned from him now, the hour for self-betrayal was past. I began to have a hideous doubt. Carmel being innocent, who could be guilty but he? I knew of no one. The misery under which I had suffered was only lightened, not removed. We were still to see evil days. The prosecution would prove its case, but there was Mr. Moffat. I must not reckon without Moffat. He had sprung one surprise. Was he not capable of springing another? Relieved, I fixed my mind again upon the proceedings. What was Mr. Fox asking her now? Miss Cumberland, are you ready to swear that you did not hear a step at that time? Yes, sir. Or see a face? Yes, sir. That you only heard a sigh, or something like one, which made you stop? No, I did not stop. You went right on. Immediately. Entering the telephone room. Yes. The door of which you shut. Yes. Intentionally. No, not intentionally. Did you shut that door yourself? I do not know. I must have, but never mind explanations. You do not know whether you shut it, or whether someone else shut it. I do not. The words fell weightily. They seemed to strike every heart. Miss Cumberland, you have said that you telephoned for the police. I telephoned to Central. For help. Yes, for help. You were some minutes doing this, you say. I have reason to think so, but I don't know definitely. The candle seemed shorter when I went out than when I came in. Are you sure you telephoned for help? Help was what I wanted, help for my sister. I do not remember my words. And then you left the building. After going for my little bag. Did you see anyone then? No, sir. Hear anyone? No, sir. Did you see your sister again? I have said that I just glanced at the couch. Were the pillows there? Yes, sir. Just as you had left them. I have said that I could not tell. Wouldn't you know if they had been disturbed? No, sir, not from the look I gave them. Then they might have been disturbed, might even have been rearranged, without your knowing it. They might. Miss Cumberland, when you left the building, did you leave it alone? I did. Was the moon shining? No, it was snowing. Did the moon shine when you went to throw the file out of the window? Yes, very brightly. Bright enough for you to see the links. I didn't look at the links. Where were you looking? Behind me. When you threw the file out? Yes. What was there behind you? A dead sister. Oh, the indescribable tone. Nothing else. No, forgive me, Miss Cumberland, I do not want to trouble you, but was there not something or someone in the adjoining room besides your dead sister, to make you look back? I saw no one. But I looked back, I do not know why. And didn't you turn at all? I do not think so. You threw the file out without looking. Yes. How do you know you threw it out? I felt it slip from my hand. Where? Over the window ledge. I had pulled the window open before I turned my head. I had only to feel for the sill. When I touched its edge, I opened my fingers. Triumph for the defense. Cross-examination on this point had only served to elucidate a mysterious fact. The position of the file, caught in the vines, was accounted for in a very natural manner. Mr. Fox shifted his inquiries. You have said that you wore a hat and coat of your brother's in coming to the clubhouse. Did you keep these articles on? No, I left them in the lower hall. Where in the lower hall? On the rack there. Was your candle lit? Not then, sir. Yet you found the rack. I felt for it. I knew where it was. When did you light the candle? After I hung up the coat. And when you came down? Did you have the candle then? Yes, for a while. But I didn't have any light when I went for the coat and hat. I remember feeling all along the wall. I don't know what I did with the candlestick or the candle. I had them on the stairs, I didn't have them when I put on the coat and hat. I knew what she did with them. She flung them out of her hand upon the marble floor. Should I ever forget the darkness swallowing up that face of mental horror and physical suffering? Miss Cumberland, you are sure about having telephoned for help, and that you mentioned the Whispering Pines in doing so? Quite sure. Oh, what weariness was creeping into her voice. Then, of course, you left the door unlocked when you went out of the building. No, I didn't. I had the key and I locked it. But I didn't realize this till I went to untie my horse, then I found the keys in my hand. But I didn't go back. Do you mean that you didn't know you locked the door? I don't remember whether I knew or not at the time. I do remember being surprised and a little frightened when I saw the keys. But I didn't go back. Yet you had telephoned for the police. Yes. And then locked them out. I didn't care. An infinite number of questions followed. The poor child was near fainting, but bore up wonderfully notwithstanding, contradicting herself but seldom, and then only from lack of understanding the question, or from sheer fatigue. Mr. Fox was considerate, and Mr. Moffat interrupted but seldom. All could see that this noble-hearted girl, this heroine of all hearts, was trying to tell the truth, and sympathy was with her, even that of the prosecution. but certain facts had to be brought out, among them the blowing off of her hat on that hurried drive home through the ever-thickening snowstorm, a fact easily accounted for, when one considered the thick coils of hair over which it had been drawn. The circumstances connected with her arrival at the house were all carefully sifted, but nothing new came up, nor was her credibility as a witness shaken. The prosecution had lost much by this witness, but it had also gained. No doubt now remained that the ring was still on the victim's hand when she succumbed to the effects of the poison, and the possibility of another presence in the house during the fateful interview just recorded, had been strengthened, rather than lessened, by Carmel's hesitating admissions. And so the question hung poised, and I was expecting to see her dismissed from the stand, when the district attorney settled himself again into his accustomed attitude of inquiry, and launched this new question: when you went into the stable to unharness your horse, what did you do with the little bag you carried? I took it out of the cutter. What, then? Set it down somewhere. Was there anything in the bag? Not now. I had left the tongs at the clubhouse, and the paper I had burned. I took nothing else. How about the candlestick? That I carried in one of the pockets of my coat. That I left, too. Was that all you carried in your pockets? Yes, the candlestick and the candle. The candlestick on one side and the candle on the other. And these you did not have on your return? No, I left both. So that your pockets were empty, entirely empty, when you drove into your own gate? Yes, sir, so far as I know. I never looked into them. And felt nothing there? No, sir. Took nothing out? No, sir. Then or when you unharnessed your horse, or afterward, as you passed back to the house? No, sir. What path did you take in returning to the house? There is only one. Did you walk straight through it? As straight as I could. It was snowing heavily, and I was dizzy and felt strange. I may have zigzagged a little. Did you zigzag enough to go back of the stable? Oh, no. You are sure that you did not wander in back of the stable? As sure as I can be of anything. Miss Cumberland, I have but a few more questions to ask. Will you look at this portion of a broken bottle? I see it, sir. Will you take it in your hand and examine it carefully? She reached out her hand. It was trembling visibly and her face expressed a deep distress, but she took the piece of broken bottle and looked at it before passing it back. Miss Cumberland, did you ever see that bit of broken glass before? She shook her head. Then she cast a quick look at her brother, and seemed to gain an instantaneous courage. No, said she. I may have seen a whole bottle like that, at some time in the clubhouse, but I have no memory of this broken end, none at all. I am obliged to you, Miss Cumberland. I will trouble you no more today. Then he threw up his head and smiled a slow, sarcastic smile at Mr. Moffat. Ye and I had said nothing. Oh, my soul's joy! If after every tempest come such calms, may the winds blow till they have wakened death. Othello. I had always loved her, that I knew even in the hour of my darkest suspicion, but now I felt free to worship her. As the thought penetrated my whole being, it made the night gladsome. Whatever awaited her, whatever awaited Arthur, whatever awaited me, she had regenerated me. A change took place that night in my whole nature, in my aspect of life and my view of women. One fact rode triumphant above all other considerations and possible distresses. Fate, I was more inclined now to call it Providence, had shown me the heart of a great and true woman, and I was free to expend all my best impulses in honoring her and loving her, whether she ever looked my way again, received or even acknowledged a homage growing out of such wrong as I had done her and her unfortunate sister. It set a star in my firmament. It turned down all the ill-written and besmirched leaves in my book of life and opened up a new page on which her name, written in letters of gold, demanded clean work in the future and a record which should not shame the aura surrounding that pure name. Sorrow for the past, dread of the future, both were lost in the glad rebound of my distracted soul. The night was dedicated to joy, and to joy alone. The next day being Sunday, I had ample time for the reaction bound to follow hours of such exaltation. I had no wish for company. I even denied myself to Clifton. The sight of a human face was more than I could bear unless it were the one face, and that I could not hope for. But the desire to see her, to hear from her, if only to learn how she had endured the bitter ordeal of the day before, soon became unbearable. I must know this much at any cost to her feelings or to mine. After many a struggle with myself, I called up Dr. Carpenter on the telephone. From him I learned that she was physically prostrate, but still in mind